Hey everyone, great to have you all here on the Grafted in Marketing Show. And today I'm really excited because this has taken a little bit of forethought in trying to wrangle up my guest today. Uh, Basically, if you're into copywriting, and a lot of the people that are watching and that I interact with are small business owners, and you're just getting introduced to the whole concept of copywriting, and then there are others of you who are in the marketing world, and you're typically hired as marketers in your industry and your agency. And so we're having conversations about copywriting. These are brand new conversations. We all have some basic understandings of maybe what the terms are, but today I'm with really the networking genius and copywriting extraordinaire that has put together one of the best, if not the best places in the planet to learn copywriting and to connect with other copywriters. And that's the founder of Copy Chief himself, Mr. Kevin Rogers. Kevin, how you doing?
Good, Gary. Thanks for having me, brother.
It is seriously I'm just super thankful. I appreciate your time. Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. So, I think actually my first exposure to you, I don't think it was before I actually got into like the deeper side of copywriting, and it was a video about a potato peeler.
Oh, right? Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah. And I think that video's had I don't know if it's like 50,000 views or like 500,000 views, but
it's something crazy. That's just a funny lesson in that in like YouTube itself.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe, I made a lot of videos, and in that one, I knew it was doing pretty well, but I wasn't really trying to build a YouTube channel or anything at that time. And so I wasn't tracking it. Mm-hmm. And then one day I'm just like looking through my YouTubes, and I see like this one video is performing incredibly better than any of your others. Most have 100 views. This one has 100,000 views. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And that was so interesting to see that the comments people were making, and you get the trolls going, because I had screwed up the audio and it was only on the left side. So a bunch of people were like, my left ear hurts you.
I heard, I saw that coming.
Really? Like that's what you took from that? Okay.
Right.
So it was, that was a really cool, and it goes to show like people want demonstration. I think, the best teaching is where you, to give people context, there was this great famous potato peeler salesman on the streets of New York City. And, he lived at the Astoria or whatever hotel. He was like a millionaire.
Right.
And he was just amazing at being a street salesman. And he would put on, it was like one of those old time boardwalk pitchmen, right?
Yep.
Where Ed McMahon used to do it in the Atlantic City and
Sure.
the Billy Mays school of, and I just broke down what he was doing and how we can use that in our copy.
Yeah.
And it was, it just took off. But I think it was, that it was just such a fascinating story of how could you sell potato peelers on the streets of New York and be a millionaire? That just doesn't add up,
Right. Yeah. $5 a piece.
Yeah. And, and then you start watching the guy and you're just fascinated and you go, wow, I totally buy one of these from these guys.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's one of those things which later I came back, because there's always kind of that fight against like long sales letters and some of those specifics. But then you watch how these guys can capture attention and keep it. And it's not a matter of can people be, retained for a period of time looking through a sales letter. It's can you actually make it worth their time to read?
Yeah.
Yeah. So getting behind some of the human psychology of
it's there's a great Dan Kennedy thing. I heard him say at a workshop once. It was essentially, there's no such thing as necessary length of copy. There's just the one simple rule is you're not allowed to bore people. It was much better the way Dan said it. But,
of course, yeah.
But that's the thing is like, nothing's too long if you're enthralled reading it.
Right.
Right. And so, I still, we're all guilty of that. We hear so much about it, dwindling attention spans that it's even for me, I sometimes get caught thinking too much about attention spans, but I heard, Ramit Sethi, right?
Yep.
I remember him saying once, his stuff is notoriously long. His emails are just going for days. And he said he tried like hell to write shorter. and it was never good. It wasn't good to him. And what he realized was, you've got to communicate how you communicate, and the right people it'll resonate with them. And you just got to let go of the rest. You can't be for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And that goes back to actually, like, one of the barriers, I think, when it comes to writing copy, and really I'm thinking too, before you get into copywriting, one of the most, small business owner mistakes is you're writing your messages for the people that are basically for yourself. You're writing about your brand, you're writing about your business, and you're not really thinking deeply into the psychology of the person who's going to receive it, So that's just one avenue where once you begin to peel that stuff back, there's whole different terminologies that you should be using when you have your customer as the focus and not you or your brand.
Yeah. And this is where it starts to get sticky. You mentioned up front that copy is a new conversation for some people in your audience. And I want to say, if you are just coming into this, a common point of confusion early on is that you will hear about the UI factor in copy. There's even like software where you can load in your copy. It'll tell you you used you this many times and only said I, because it's supposed to be all about them. But it's important to remember that they also want to connect with you. And if your story you're telling from your personal experience is interesting and relevant, and you're inviting them in to see themselves through that lens and learn the lesson you learned, then that's just as relevant as saying you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, again, even goes back to the framework of thinking about that connection, so even when you're writing about you, you're still thinking about the person who's going to receive this, who's going to be the one to read this, and how am I going to connect with them? So I guess in terms of like going back for you, how did you make what were you, I know you were in comedy before, but what was the job that made the transition before copywriting?
Yeah. A friend of mine who I knew from comedy had started a business, and it was actually a timeshare resale company of all things. And it was a very shady industry. But he was doing it well. He was doing it right. And he'd gotten sober. He was a bit of an a-hole when I knew him. I didn't really like the guy, honestly. But he was funny, and we'd had some good times together. But I was like, I don't want this guy in my life. Yeah. But he, for whatever reason, felt like he was in the program. And I think he'd stolen from me. He'd stolen jokes and money in different instances. And like, I wasn't worried about it, but he partly wanted to make restitution. It was kind of interesting when I think back on it. But anyway, he was very engaging, and I don't want to say manipulative, but he would find a way to get what he wanted. Sure. And he made me an offer I couldn't refuse. I was working as a bellman at a hotel and making no money. And he said, look, I'll pay you twice what you're making now to just sit next to me and learn this business. He said, because I've got 10 people who work for me who are all knowledgeable enough to help me run the business, but I don't trust any of them to do it for a minute. He said, you don't know anything about my business, but I would trust you with my life. He said, so I'll just pay you to learn. And if you like it, we'll see where it goes. And I had to take the money, and it was uncomfortable because, I'm not a prude, obviously, but it was a sales floor environment. Everybody, you could smoke inside the building, and everybody's chain smoking, and people would be nervous when they came into his office. So they'd light a cigarette and he'd light a cigarette. And
everyone's twitching.
Cancer just sitting here.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of heart. It was like Glengarry Glen Ross, it was like this kind of environment. But I'll tell you what, man, I knew instinctively like that part of how life works was missing from my knowledge base. I was an artist, I was wanted to be a comic. And when I realized I didn't want to live like a comic, like a broke ass comic, I was like, I got to figure out that thing where some people give other people money. I don't know how that works. And this was an opportunity to do that. So it was and 3 months later, he announced, I'm pretty sure he made this up, but he's like, I saw my doctor, and he said, if I don't take time off right now, like completely leave the company for a while, I'm going to die. That's a little dramatic, right?
Yeah. That's quite a specific diagnosis.
I'll be dead in 2 weeks if I don't walk out of this building right now.
2 weeks in Bermuda. He said that's the only way I'm going to live.
Exactly. And I remember he literally like threw me his keychain. I remember I could see in slow motion the keys like coming through the air at me, and he goes, "You're in charge. Carol knows anything you need to know to run the business." Mm-hmm. He goes, "And by the way, you're now making, what, 1,200 a week or something, like, again, like doubled my pay,
Yeah.
And I was like, I have
got to do it.
Hey,
yeah.
And again, man, it was just like such a great. Now I had to start learning how to negotiate with people. Everybody wanted an advance on their paycheck, and everybody wanted better leads. So, long answer to your question, but it was that environment, that sales environment, where I started to fall in love with sales and appreciate the science of it. I was also in charge of compliance, so that was interesting. I had to keep our A+ rating with the BBB, and so that meant, monitoring calls and recording everything and going into arbitration with people who felt they'd been wronged, and proudly never lost a case because I felt confident that I could back up what, our claims and things. But then he hired a consultant who was a direct response nerd, and he was very into Dan Kennedy and very into Gary Halbert, and he just talked about this stuff incessantly. And I saw him starting to use direct response principles and create like an inbound lead campaign, and what a stark difference that was from our typical outbound cold outreach campaigns. And he's the one who turned me on to copywriting and said, "I know you love to write. You should learn about copywriting." And I got bitten by the bug, and that was it,
Wow. So do you remember like what your first like actual copy was? It like a postcard? Was it like a mailer? Was it like a landing page? Or
the first thing I ever wrote like that actually went out to customers?
Yeah.
It's so funny you say that, because I swear I just happened upon this, and I was showing some of my students this yesterday. This is the first thing I ever wrote. I happen to have it.
Wow.
It's for a lawn company. And the guy came to my door to sell me lawn service, and he was savvy, and we started just chatting, and he was a bit of a sales geek too. And I said, "Man, we should send out a letter." I said, "Instead of you knocking on doors, let's just send out a letter to the 200 closest homes to your zone or whatever."
Yeah.
And so my wife is the testimonial.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I don't know how many people can answer your question that directly, but that's the first thing I ever wrote.
Yeah, you just happen to have it there. This is like
happen to have it, right? Still clinging on to that original glory. And it did convert at like 20% too.
Wow.
But
nice.
I made him, I was like, "Look, Gary Halbert says you've got to hand write the envelopes. It's the best way to do it." Yeah. And I made him and his wife sat and hand wrote 200 envelopes. And even though it converted, he's like, "I'm never doing that again."
It's not worth the 20%. Oh boy, that's interesting. So yeah, so before we went live, we were talking a little bit about just some of the people that you've just shared the stage with, have had obviously at Copy Chief and the events. Is there, first of all, a Copy Chief event this year?
I don't know yet. I'm still deciding, but I hope there is. But yeah.
Okay.
That's where we are.
So in terms of a lot of the people, a lot of the great marketers, some of which we talked about beforehand, what is some similarities you see in the way they think? I mean, one thing I get, even in the interviews that you've had, there's like this just casual, relaxed kind of demeanor amongst a lot of them. Do you notice that?
Yeah, that's an interesting observation. You know what it is? I think that comes from them being very curious people. I mean, there is a confidence that comes with being sort of like top level pro.
Sure. Yeah.
I would say in the case of like a John Carlton, I think he was always that way. I can't imagine John being nervous.
Yeah. Right.
Dean Jackson, we talked about, who, again, he's just always Dean and always super chill.
Yeah.
Other people are a little more neurotic, but they're very smart and they're very curious. I think that's mostly what we're seeing in that demeanor, is like they're really just observing life and interested in everything around them.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of what makes them great.
Gotcha. In terms of students at Copy Chief, those of us who are diving in, it's one of my favorite places to be. I've spent a lot of time on some specific courses where I've watched like 15 times,
Cool.
And is there something that you see when you're looking at students come up where
Oh yeah.
is there anything that you notice about the way they think that you go, they're going to be able to connect very uniquely?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. It's that similar, same traits really. It's like,
Yeah.
The biggest thing is like, if they're going to make it
Mm-hmm.
in the industry, because, it takes so much more than being a good copywriter. You could have all the
Mm-hmm.
talent in the world, but if you're
Yeah.
shut in, or
Yeah.
you're too nervous or too shy, or self-deprecating, to get yourself out there, it's going to be tough.
Yeah.
But it is hunger,
Mm.
curiosity, and
Mhm.
I asked Clayton Makepeace the same exact question once, and he had a great answer. He said three things: I look for hunger,
Mm.
I look for what was it? The hunger. I guess the other thing was, like curiosity, like research. Are they really engaged with life, and are they just endlessly curious about things? Which means they'll do the research, because that's the key part.
Yeah.
And three, can they write a letter? Like,
Mhm.
show me a letter, like, dear mom, just like, show me a letter you've
Mhm.
written. Because if,
Mm.
that's the beauty of our industry, is like, is fractionalized as copy gets, and all the different formats. At the end of the day, you're communicating with another human being and trying to make a connection. And
Mm.
there's no better way to see that on display than in a personal letter.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it really does come down to, like, could you, Joe Schriefer from Agora Publishing, when he was looking for copywriters, that was the one test he'd give them. It's like, sell me your favorite book.
Yeah.
Just, use a headline and use some sales letter formatting, but at the 2 pages, and show me you understand the basic principles of what goes into a sales letter, but mostly compel me to have to read this book.
Yeah.
So I think if you have that instinct, if you're good at persuading people sort of naturally,
Mhm.
and you're a little bit aware of how you're doing that,
Mhm.
and you're interested in the science of it, and you're hungry to succeed, then that's the winning combo.
Yeah. Wow. That's fantastic. When it comes to like business owners who are just now getting more exposure to their need to do, at least think more intently about copywriting, maybe not do it themselves.
Mhm.
What are some things that they can do pretty quickly to just transform or tweak their current offers? Well, let's just use any standard service business. And let's say they
Mhm.
say, call Joe Schmo Lawn Care Service. We'll give that as an example. 888, we'll come out, give you a free something. What are some minor tweaks that they can do just to begin to make some changes in the right direction?
Yeah, I think sharing more of themselves,
Wow. Yeah.
especially as a service business owner.
Yeah.
Think about everybody right now hearing us. Like, think about your town,
Mhm.
and who are again, the plumbers, HVAC, those kinds of companies, the garage, the popular auto garage.
Yeah.
You probably know who runs that business, or have seen them on TV
Sure.
advertising their business.
Yep.
And there's not a coincidence there.
Mm.
It's so I have a thing that's easy plug time, Gary.
Yeah.
A free book that I wrote years ago that you probably know about it. It's helped a lot of people do exactly this, called the 60-second sales hook.
Yep.
And it's actually Dean who helped me put this book out, but
Shocker.
and succeed with it.
Yeah.
And I took an old joke formula and turned it into what I call a sales hook formula by just changing the last part of it. And so it's a very familiar pattern to people. And so you can literally tell your story of your business and why you're uniquely qualified to help them, why they should choose you in 60 seconds or less. And so that's my favorite for business owners, because especially if people think like, oh, copy's hard, I'm not a writer, I can't. It's literally a fill in the blank thing. Yeah. And if they just put the right words in there and trust the formula, and then they read it and they're like, oh my God, I just wrote copy. It's like a parlor trick,
Right.
It really works well.
Yeah. And I think to broaden that out, the conversation around a 3x5 pitch, Your 3x5 card pitch?
4x6. Yeah.
Oh yeah, 4x6. Yeah, yeah. I had
Yeah.
smaller cards.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You want to explain a little bit about that as well?
Sure. Yeah. So 4x6 this is something I used to save myself, because as a copywriter, my biggest hurdle was getting that first draft done, because I was a relentless editor as I wrote guy, and brutal, horrible way to write. Yeah, but I couldn't stop myself. And so I realized, okay, I just need an outline, because that's what's making my brain go haywire, is I'm thinking about all of it at the same time. And so the 4x6 is the 10 pieces, 10 parts of any sales pitch that
traditionally is,
make it work.
Yep.
And the reason it's broken down into 4x6 for two reasons. One is there's 4 what I call essential facts that people need to know. And if you don't tell them, they won't buy, because their brain will see something wrong. So those are non-negotiable. And then there's 6 what I call, like, amplifiers that will make it more appealing for them to buy now instead of waiting.
Yeah.
And the other reason I call it the 4x6 is because I love 4x6 cards. I use them to take notes and do everything. And I got this down to where I could fit each of those parts in summary onto a 4x6 index card. Yeah. And so that's how I suggest using the formulas. Like, just get 10 4x6 cards, and can you fit what you need to say about each of these 10 parts? And that won't be your complete ad oftentimes, but once you have that, you know exactly what needs to fill in the rest. And it makes it, you go from spending 2 weeks on something to sometimes 2 hours if you know the subject really well.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that it allows in terms of like creativity is it forces you to put your service or offering in a box, if you will, and just say, what is it that you're trying to pitch here? Rather than like thinking way too broad. And then as you solidify it, then you can really begin to expand on it, so
100%.
Yeah. So, in Copy Chief, Allison gives a lot of tutorials on like, avatars, customer avatars. And you mentioned research as being one of the primary indicators that a student's going to do well. When it comes to research, what are some of the, I'll give you an example. I have a client in the financial advisory services. And as we're going through their client list, we notice a grouping, a good surge of customers or their clients, about 30 to 50 that were part of a local university. The local university has about 14,000 employees. So it's a big, well-known university. And so we're drilling down, really trying to understand what are some of the commonalities here. And in terms of just thinking through research and thinking through what are some of the things that you want to look for when you're grouping together maybe a niche market or a niche client base that can drive home your offering?
Yeah, that's a really good question. First of all, I think the best way to get that information is doing what you said, is like finding it first, and I always said a dialogue is the most valuable thing we can have as a business owner and a marketer, because if you have an open channel for people to communicate back to you, you'll always know what to sell them next, because they'll tell you, here's what I'd love. Yeah. So to me, it's sometimes less about demographics and it's more about, what problems do you fix? Look at it through that lens. It's like, what other problems does my audience have, my market have, that isn't being solved? Yeah. Or that I have solved. And it might be a smaller part of what you're selling or providing now. And it's just nobody's ever niched down into that. Right. Right. So I think of it less in terms of, geography or demographics, and more about just understanding their needs, their desires, and their heartaches. Yeah. Yeah. And some of their end goals, where they're going in life. And boy, as you begin to unpack that, it's amazing how like just something pops up. I remember your interview with Clayton Makepeace, and he said like when he mentioned one about the holistic medicine thing. It's been a while, but he mentioned something about a headline he had written, and it was about like your doctor wants to like put a hole in you for $1 or something. Like
through your wallet, or something that was just like, oh, when you heard it, you were just like, oh man, that one's going to be good. And
Yeah.
it's just like through that research, sometimes you can hear where they're going or some of the concerns. And as you just kind of look over it, it can just kind of explode right off the page. And you wouldn't know that unless you got to know the actual person.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
I think about Marcella Allison, another great copywriter who worked closely with Clayton, has worked with all the greats, talking about writing a product for incontinence and wanting to understand beyond, the chatter, like, what is that like for someone to suffer that?
Yeah.
So she went to the adult diaper aisle at the grocery store and waited for like other people to be shopping for it. I think a woman said, could you get that down from the shelf for me? She couldn't reach it or something. And she just started chatting with her.
Yeah.
And she discovered things like, it's embarrassing to bring it to the register. And there's all these like little things that you beyond the medical issue of it, like what's the human side of having this problem that needs to be solved, And so I always think of that stuff. Like you said, it's like, if you're really empathetic and you're really curious and you want to understand what your customer's reality is really like, and you're willing to do that research, that's why the great copywriters were great. Gary Bencivenga, one of the just greatest that ever lived, would always say, I don't remember the exact percentage he would use, but he's like, if you give me 10 hours to write an ad, I'm spending 8 of them on research.
Wow.
Because that's where I'll win. That's where I'll find the nugget.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the differentiation between you and your competitors, and your offer and anyone else's offer, or a bad offer and now a better offer, as you're just diving deep into the understanding. In fact, it even goes further, because a lot of times your USP can be extracted from the customer psychology and issues and concerns. I've been in enough situations where I'm trying to wrestle with a client what their USP is. But then when we begin to look at the customer research and we look at really what they're saying, sometimes the USP is much more obvious through what the customer has said than what the actual owners of the company have to say.
That's a great point. 100%. I think it's just being open to that and discovering that, because you're right. It's easy to create your unique selling position around what you think it should be, because that's why you started the business. But we often forget why we started the business and what problem we solved for ourselves that created that eureka moment where, like, I bet more people would want to solve this. Because then we get into the day-to-day of growing the thing and looking at numbers and making sure the trucks arrive on time and all this stuff. And it's like, you forget what the problem was in the beginning. Now you created new problems. Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's why even sometimes when you're talking to business owners, and you've mentioned this before, like sometimes they'll have they'll just have this tunnel vision in terms of why they're doing. And this actually, I think your point on this one was when it comes to like customer service, or you're trying to find out why people are complaining or why there are so many chargebacks. And you go to the owner and the owner's like, they're all jerks. That's why, But in reality, it's not that they're all jerks. You go to the staff and they're like, we have half the pages not in there and we're not delivering when we said, so there's some forced transparency that comes out when you get in front of your potential clients and your current clients that you can't wiggle around, and is really good for business owners just to hear,
Yeah. John Carlton says this all the time, that was his big thing was he's like, talk to the owner, you get what they think is going on. He said, and then show up at the office. It was back in the old days, right?
Yeah.
He's like, go talk to the receptionist.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And talk to the salespeople, and they'll tell you what's really going on. And that's how you'll win in the ad.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's good stuff. In terms of flags or like pinnacles in the momentum of your growth as not just you particularly, but anybody in marketing and business, you've shared some things with the group in the past of like an email that you got that was like super impactful, and then you framed it. That may have been at John Carlton.
That's John Carlton. I'm staring at it right now.
Okay. Yeah. How important are things like that in terms of for you to be able to look back on and say, okay, I can do this?
Yeah. It's a great question. It's to me central to everything. Having mentors is a gift. Like the fact that you just meet these people who are willing to put the time into you and see something in you that you might not see yet. But something else I've realized is it goes both ways. And there's a thing I like to call the mentee mindset. And I always remember the first time I ever paid somebody to coach me, it was when I was first freelancing, and this guy was offering like basically like, you know, how to make yourself more appealing as a freelancer. And I remember I paid him $400. It was a lot of money to me at the time. And that was on like a Friday, and I was going to have my first call with him on Monday, right? I spent the entire weekend. I immediately imagined the things he was going to ask me about and for that I didn't have. And it was like, why don't you have a website? Or why does your website look so horrible? And why haven't you started a blog, right? So I spent the entire weekend creating a better website and starting a blog and writing like my first post.
Yeah.
And of course I get on the call with him and he doesn't care about any of that stuff.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
But it turned out to be significant for me because like blogging was my first realization that I didn't know I was building an audience back then that I was until I actually made an offer to them and I was beating other affiliates. I was like, this is insane. I have 300 people on my list, but they were like super, you know, connected. And so it was that mentee mindset of, okay, it's not about the $400. Yeah, I want to get the value out of that, but I want to impress this mentor. I'm paying them because I think they can help me, and I don't want to show up like an idiot here. And so that you having that intent, it's really everything in life, Gary, is like a matching of intents, isn't it? Like every successful relationship.
Yep.
So if a mentor has the true intention of helping you and guiding you, and hopefully has the wisdom and experience to do it, and you have the intention of being the best student they could ever imagine having, there's no way you can't succeed together.
No, and that's true in marriage. That's true in business partnerships. It's true in life. You both have to be looking for the intent that catapults all of those relationships. That's really good. Let's see. In regards to, I actually lost track of my question.
I like that. When it gets so good to us that we forget.
Yeah. Now I'm like, man, I can go in 20 different directions on that one. Oh boy. So in terms of people that are signing up, like if they're looking for more information about you, before we get to that, I really want to know, who is it that you want to be looking for you when they find you, when they find Copy Chief, they're finding a home. Who are those people? Yeah,
good question. Yeah, it's interesting, right? We've been blessed to have an amazing community at Copy Chief for going into our 7th year now.
Wow.
And you know what's interesting about it is, you know, people will say, wow, how did you do it? Like you attract such great people. And I always say, I wish I could take credit. And I'm not saying it's because you know, it's like I don't know another way to be. And I know there's as many people out there who just probably don't like me at all. You know what I mean? But if I found out I had to be a different way or pretend to be a different way in order to have this business, I wouldn't have this business. That's the thing. It's like, so I'm grateful that enough people resonate with me and want to join and be part of it, because dude, the minute I opened the doors to Copy Chief, it quit being about me. Do you have kids?
I actually have 8.
Wow, 8 kids.
Yeah, okay. 8 kids.
So
yeah.
I really appreciate this. It's funny. I'll never forget that the day I opened the doors to Copy Chief and people started buying and coming in as a membership community, right? I was talking to my mentor, James Schramko, he was my mentor through creating it. And I said, I can only equate this to becoming a parent, because we had literally spent 9 months building it. I said, so we spent 9 months creating this thing, you know, thinking of every way it could get hurt or how to, you know, give it the best chance possible. And now it's here. And you immediately realize, oh my God, the scary part is I don't get to control everything from here. It's
Mm.
now of the world.
Yeah, it's
I'm
birthed.
responsible,
Yeah.
but I can't
Yeah.
save it from everything, and I got to let it have its own experience. And so
Wow.
that's kind of what it was like. It was like these other people came in and gave it the personality and the
Wow.
vibe. And what's fascinating is 7 years in, it has that same vibe, that same core. The
Mhm.
values haven't changed, the rules haven't changed, how people engage hasn't changed, but the people have changed. You know,
Mm.
the core group of people who are still with me all this time, but
Mhm.
hundreds of people have come and gone. And
Mhm.
I never sweat somebody leaving,
Mhm.
uh, because you know, I realize that you can't keep a customer forever
Mhm.
in this industry. You know, what are the chances that you'll always be exactly what they need for their
Right.
entire career? You
Right.
want to, but
Yeah.
what you realize is there will always be a rotation, and as long
Yeah.
as you're seeing similar things happen and
Mhm.
conversations happen, then it's more fun to just observe, like, what's the vibe in here now? Like, it's
Right.
almost 8 kids. I mean, you see, they all have their own personality,
Yeah, yeah.
and every stage of their development
Absolutely.
is so
Absolutely.
different. And you have
Hey,
to approach
you
it
can't
different.
stop it. Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
You can't stop it. You can't fret it. You can be
Yep.
afraid. It's hard to
Yeah.
not do that. But
Yeah.
you know, people say all the time, there's this, I always rejected this idea when we had kids that, oh yeah, but wait till they become teenagers. I know they're cute now. And I
Right,
was
right,
like, what if I
right,
just say no to that? Like,
right.
I,
I don't wanna go through that.
I don't want to go through that. And I think, I'd be honest, man, like as a parent,
Yeah.
I had the hardest part with like from 3 to 5,
Yep.
because they're just little drunks.
Yep. Yep.
You can't rationalize with them. They're cute as hell when they're sleeping, and they're fun to read to and play with, but
Right. Soon as they wake up, it's
60% of the
game on.
time they're just a wreck, and
Right.
you're ruining everything
So
right now.
yep, yep, exact yeah, there's no terrible twos, it's definitely like 3 to 5.
Yeah. And I remember thinking, I can't wait till they're little humans and teenagers with their own thoughts and personalities, because then I'll know how to talk to them, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, and that's how it's
Yeah.
been. I'm happy to
Wow,
say I was 17
wow.
and a 14-year-old, and
Mm,
we get along great. And
mm,
sure, they're dealing with more complex challenges in life as they
sure.
transition into adulthood. But I've loved, I think, this phase more than any other.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Speaking of that, as you're looking toward the future of your child here, you're looking toward the future of copy. I see, like, personally, that there's such a unique opportunity for copywriters right now, and part that's because the bar was set so low with the advancements of technology, and your ability to then go and produce content and copy
Mhm.
on a website at no cost, no
Oh yeah.
additional cost. And so the bar, even on like a lot of digital marketers today, they're not really thinking about the copy. They're just thinking about how, like, chatbot works, or
Mhm.
how many views or clicks. They're not tightening up really what that means. So I see a unique opportunity for copywriters to come onto the scene in ways that I think are unique now than they've ever been. Do you get that vibe? How do you see that?
Yeah, I love that observation. It's very true. Like it's become just another function of a task of, put
Mhm.
words here.
Yeah.
This happens all the time with designers. They're like, okay, now we need the words to put on the website. And people are like,
Right. Right.
can you do that?
Right.
And like,
Right.
no, I make pretty pictures. I don't
That's
write words.
right. Right. Or
So
they're like, sure, yeah,
they
for
don't think
25
to bring in a
bucks.
cop. Yeah. And then they put it off because, like, I got all F's in grammar. I'm horrible at this, and
Right.
so you're right. It has become just like a task commodity. And you're right, like, because people are so used to everything just flying past their eyes. Again,
Mhm.
I'll quote John Carlton one more time. I always do. He had this great phrase that a copywriter's job is to be the one thing that people experience in their busy day that
Mhm.
knocks them out of their zombie state, makes them sit up and pay attention, and
Mhm.
then be entertained and informed and enlightened, and hopefully go through a transition and
Mhm.
buy the product.
That's a lot of work.
And if you think of it that way, like
Yeah.
that is the standard you should have for all your communication. It doesn't mean that like just confirming somebody's purchase needs to be, the most amazing copy you've ever written. But when it comes to like standing out and, we see the companies who take a little extra time and have some zing and some personality to how they communicate. And we always appreciate that. And it's not that hard to do, especially, and it's also not that expensive to do, to bring in a pro to help you find a better voice for your brand and do that consistently. It's a huge difference maker.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Well, I appreciate your time here. We're at the 40-minute mark. I'd just like to ask, where should people go to get started in their interaction with you? Copychief.com.
Yeah, copychief.com. Yeah, that you can get the 60-second sales hook book on that page. You can also go to 60secondsaleshook.com and just download it free there. We even have some free video trainings there. I think that's the thing I love for people to do still, because it's just so immediately helpful and effective. And so come and I have a podcast that I really like doing, and I think people get a lot out of, and that's Copy Chief Radio. You can find that at copychief.com as well. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Kevin, I appreciate you being on the show, and look forward to catching up with you on the inside of Copy Chief and talking to you more about how we can make offers better. Thanks, Gary. Appreciate you having me, man. Enjoyed the conversation.
Hey, thank you.